Hey there, this is Mr. Icarus, and welcome to the Icarus Report, where I round up the last week or so in interesting gaming news. First up is a little something about Quake Champions, and at E3 2016 you might remember Bethesda unveiled a cinematic reveal trailer for Quake Champions, and it seemed to feature a few interesting additions to the Quake multiplayer formula, notably the presence of several character-specific abilities. Naturally, this ruffled the feathers of some Quake multiplayer enthusiasts, because apparently the gameplay formula that's been kicking around since Quake 3 is some sort of sacred cow. That said, it was a cinematic trailer, not gameplay, and certainly not enough to form any kind of opinion on the final game. At QuakeCon, however, we finally got a peek at some actual gameplay, and to be perfectly honest, it's still not entirely clear whether those abilities are tied to specific hero characters. For all we know so far, they could be loadout based, swappable between any hero, or they could even be map based power-ups that you have to actively seek out during a match. Either way, the core gameplay is still very much Quake-like to me. We've got rocket jumping, precision shots. I even saw a brief bit of speedy bunny hopping in there too, which was nice. So for me, it just looks like the same old Quake I know and enjoy, with just a few extra bells and whistles sprinkled on top of that established gameplay. It'll certainly be interesting to see how they affect the flow of that gameplay, but as I said earlier, we're gonna have to wait for more concrete details before we can form a more solid opinion about it. That said though, there's nothing stopping us from speculating, is there? So, on the off chance that the abilities we've seen so far are in fact hero-specific, then there needs to be a very tight balance in place to ensure that no one hero character has an ability advantage over the rest of them. There would need to be effective counter abilities, and also, I imagine, the ability to swap between hero characters. That would pretty much be essential in that kind of situation. Personally, that doesn't seem very Quake-like to me, especially when you factor in all the traditional game modes like Deathmatch, Team Deathmatch, Freeze Tag, Capture the Flag, and Duel. It would really complicate how those traditional modes work. Honestly, I'd rather have them be based on timed pickups. That way abilities will slot in nicely alongside traditional power-ups like haste and quad damage, and then you don't have to bother with all of that hero ability counter bollocks. There's also additional rumblings of id Software considering the free-to-play model for Quake Champions, something that occasionally strikes fear into the heart of many gamers, but I guess it's possible to pull it off and not completely gimp the game in the process? Honestly, just keep it cosmetic. Don't lock gameplay-altering stuff, don't lock it behind a paywall. In fact, you know what? Don't bother with free-to-play at all. I'd rather just pay upfront like I do for the vast majority of games I play and crack on with turning other players into bloody chunks on the arena floor, safe in the knowledge that we're all on even footing. But yeah, this is all we're relegated to right now, speculating and grumbling about stuff that might not end up even being a thing. Also, for those heralding this as the imminent casualization and demise of the Quake franchise via some insidious, tentacle-like influence of Overwatch, you do know that Quake Live is still a thing, right? I mean, sure, it used to be free, but even now it's only something like £7, and people still play it. So if you crave that old-school Quake gameplay without the threat of having to deal with something new and shiny, well, there you go. Bunny hop and frag to your heart's content. I will just be sat here reciting my mantra for any game that I'm vaguely interested in. So, all together now, please don't be crap, please don't be crap, please don't be crap. So what else have we got here this week? Ah yes, No Man's Sky. So as of Monday the 8th of August, PS4 gamers finally got their sweaty palms on No Man's Sky. If you haven't heard of it by now, then you must have been living under an extremely well soundproofed rock. As with most games that manage to generate an unreasonable level of hype before release, Metal Gear Solid 5, many people have turned up and found themselves a little disappointed by some aspects of the game. One of which is the confusing nature of player interaction and what role, if any, multiplayer plays in No Man's Sky. Turns out the answer to that is not much, considering two Twitch streamers decided to go and meet up, discovering that even though they were both in the same place at the same time, they couldn't actually see each other. Now, apparently it is possible to scan for other players within No Man's Sky, it's just that when it comes to actually using that feature and meeting up with other people in the same neighborhood, it seems that there's still some kinks in the instancing that need to be ironed out. The way it's supposed to work is that when players are in close proximity to each other, they essentially join a local lobby or instance that would allow them to pass by or run into each other in the same space. However, when it comes to specifics, Sean Murray, lead developer of No Man's Sky, has been repeatedly vague on stuff like how many people can actually be part of a lobby, and quite frankly dismissive of the chances of any two players actually meeting up, stating that No Man's Sky is not a multiplayer game, don't go in looking for that experience. Well, you know what? It happened. You know why it happened? It happened because the mechanic itself was already in place, and this is what gamers do. We immerse ourselves in a world and we test its boundaries, so naturally, some of us are going to try and meet up no matter how much you try to discourage or downplay it. I don't think Sean Murray actually realized quite how much anticipation there was for No Man's Sky. I mean, there was a guy that paid nearly $1,500 just for the privilege of being able to play the game before anybody else. If anything, you should never underestimate an enthusiastic player base, because they're gonna sniff those secrets and bugs out quicker than you could ever possibly imagine. Remember that PT demo that Hideo Kojima put out a while back? Even he was surprised that gamers cracked its secrets so quickly. Anyway, it's still early days for No Man's Sky. There will undoubtedly be updates to come that will hopefully rectify those instancing issues, and hopefully when the launch honeymoon is over and done with, people will still be happy with the game they've got in comparison to the hyped up game that they've had living in their imagination since what? When was the very first trailer? Man, back in E3 2014. If there are any lessons to be learned here by Hello Games, it's that there are some things you really need to be absolutely crystal clear on, because the internet can take the smallest detail, take it for a ride on the hype train, and leave you with expectations that you will find extremely hard to live up to. It's all well and good being secretive about the things players will discover, just make sure you don't give them the wrong impression of how they'll go about discovering those things. A few of you out there will be happy to learn that I'm in fact not covering any Pokemon Go news stories this week, and that is for the chief reason that I am absolutely sick to death of reading Pokemon Go news stories. I mean, you stare into the abyss long enough and the abyss stares back. That's what it feels like when I do research for Pokemon Go news, and I'd like to go at least 1 week without reading about the inevitable decline of mankind via cute Pokemon and catching them via balls. So yeah, leaving that out for this week. Feel free to celebrate in whatever form suits you best. And this has been the Icarus Report. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Feel free to let me know what you thought in the comments below, and be sure to share this video if you think others will find it interesting. This has been Mr. Icarus. Thank you very much for watching. Icarus out.